presentation to kick us off this afternoon. So I'm going to speak about paper 1 of my master's thesis today, which is based on qualitative interviews that I conducted this past summer. And my working title at the moment is Modifying Constraints to Sustainable Agriculture, Public Procurement, and Agroecology in Santa Catarina, Brazil. So considering that half of the world's usable lands are under agricultural production, the way that we manage those lands is very important in balancing the production of food with ecological sustainability, considering issues such as nutrients leaching into waterways, deforestation, loss of biodiversity, extensive use of agricultural chemicals, etc. We need to find a way to balance these two. So there have been many suggested models that have been put out there. Conservation agriculture, payments for ecosystem services, the rest of the list of ways that we're trying to internalize and deal with some of the environmental costs of agricultural production. But today I'm going to focus on agroecology because I think it provides a balance between looking at food production, environmental sustainability, as well as concern for the social and economic livelihoods of the marginalized farmers that are often marginalized due to the way that we conventionally produce food. But unfortunately, the adoption of agroecology is fairly low around the world, though international attention is increasing, such as a lot of emphasis from Olivier de Schutter at the FAO that's trying to promote it. And one way that has been suggested is public procurement. And public procurement programs are essentially a form of mediated market. So if we look at a hypothetical free market over there, the idea of mediated markets is that the government acts as the buyer. They purchase foods from farmers, they set the price. They can put conditions on the suppliers, so they can say only people in a certain area, only women, only youth. They can put a condition. And then they structure the demand. They decide what is going to be bought. So they can, in the case of my research, they prioritize food production, food crop production, not commodity crops, such as animal feed. And they set a quota. So they pick how much is going to be supplied in the program. And the objectives of this are to provide market access for marginalized farmers. You're setting conditions on who can participate, setting fair and stable prices, rural economic development more broadly, increase food security by prioritizing food crops over commodity crops, and the creation of local supply chain linkages, so trying to create a closer link between producers and consumers. This is a slightly older version of my slideshow, so I think it's pretty close. But anyways, I left this in Portuguese. I had it in English. Anyways, two very well-known programs are in Brazil. So the Programa Nacional de Alimentação Escolar is the National School Feeding Program, which goes by the acronym of PENAI, and the Programa de Aquisição de Alimentos, which is the PAA. It's a more broad program that, through this very simplified graphic, you can see this program, both of these programs specifically set conditions. Suppliers have to be family farmers, and then through the PENAI, it goes just to schools and daycares, and through the PAA, they supply more broadly to social institutions, food banks, hospitals, etc. But my research that I'm going to talk about today is just focused on the school feeding program because that's the farmers with whom I interviewed were selected just from this program. And how this one works in terms of public procurement, farmers, I better keep up with this. So farmers are given a quota within the system, so they provide crops through the program, which are then given to the schools. Quota is set, in this case, it's 20,000 reais, which is about $8,000 per farmer, is the maximum that you can supply to this program. And then the government, so the PENAI, just to be clear, is a government program. It's actually established in law that all municipalities have to have it. So they set prices, and they're supposed to be fair prices, so closer to market prices, get rid of the middleman, etc. So how does this relate to agroecology? Again, in Portuguese, but I will specify. This declaration came in 2013 that this program had to specifically prioritize agroecological production, certified agroecological production, which I will get to, that there is a certification body that has specific certification for that. So these quotes that I've taken out essentially talk about promoting agroecological products within the program, prioritizing it, so those farmers who have certification get into the program first, and all of those who have certification get a 30% higher price for their products. I'm going to skip to this first and then skip back. So basically the research question that I was looking at was how Brazil's national school feeding program, so the PNAE that I'm talking about, can modify or reduce the constraints on family farmers interested in adopting agroecology. So I'll go back to this as my conceptual framework, which is using the theory of constrained choice. So it's a sociological theory that comes from the two different camps when people talk about structure versus agency. Structure being the system, and if people are complete structuralists, they think that no one has free will, and they're essentially operating within a system that is deciding what they are going to do. On the other side, there's agency, people who say everyone has. It's the ability to make a choice freely. Constrained choice, however, allows for both. So it talks about how there's a structure within external structures such as social norms, racism, sexism, that people operate within, and it limits the choices that are available, or the options that are available to individuals. So they still have agency within those constrained options, but there are constraints placed on them. You can't just, someone may choose, I want to adopt agroecology, but there are many things that may be stopping them, which I will get to because that's what I'm researching. But what I'm particularly looking at is how, if you're looking at the structural constraints, how does the PNAE, the school feeding program, change these or modify these to allow for an easier transition to agroecology? Okay. So my case study was in Santa Catarina, Brazil, which is in the south. And we chose that state as a contrast to a similar study that was done in 2014. They broadly looked at they looked at a number of different programs that Brazil has supporting agroecology and family farming. But it was done in the Northeast, which is a very different context. Some of their findings were that it was a lack of awareness, lack of technical services, lack of social organization, poverty that limited people being able to adopt agroecology. So we chose this different site that has, relative to the Northeast, lower food insecurity rates, lower poverty rates, higher education, stronger institutions, as well a presence of agroecology through social movements. So this is a picture of the MST, which some of you may know of, the Landless Workers Movement. They specifically embrace agroecology as their promoted way of producing. And as well as that, there's a strong network of agroecological groups and a certification body in the south of Brazil. So it's called the Rede Ecovida. You can see they have a decentralized network here throughout the southern 3 states of Brazil, Santa Catarina right here. And they provide agroecological certification, which I'm not going to get into too much the difference between organic and agroecology in this sense, but because sometimes the farmers use them interchangeably, and that was a question that I asked them of the difference that they see between the two. But I'm basing this on the certification standards that they have in the Rede Ecovida are different and sort of like the organic standards, but more including some social standards as well, if that makes sense. So my study design, I was down in Santa Catarina for 3 months last summer, and I chose 3 municipalities in the center of the state, in the high plains, I guess they would be, which I chose these 3. They have the different colors sort of, I'll show you this graph as well. I guess I'll talk about this for a second. These 3 municipalities that I chose to do my research in, I chose them because the PNAEs that are operating in those 3 municipalities are actually operating. Some places they aren't. But they have a different composition of farmers in them. So in this red one here, which corresponds to the red graph over here, sorry I didn't put the full legend in there. Red is conventional. The blue-green, I guess I left it as organic, but agroecological in this sense. And T is for in transition, so people who are in their official transition period. So in this Municipality, all of the farmers in the program were conventional. So out of 48 farmers, I interviewed 19. In Curitibanos here, they had 12 farmers who were all certified, and I interviewed 7. And in the final one, Correia Pinto, they had a mix. So they had some certified, some in transition, and some that were conventional, and I got a mix in there. I think I did 12 of 34 of the farmers. So back to my conceptual framework. What I'm going to present now are some of my preliminary ideas or preliminary results of what I found through my interviews based on this concept of constrained choice. So I'm going to introduce a constraint that through the literature has been established, discuss how it was or was not present in each municipality, and what ways the program was able to modify or reduce that constraint to farmers. So the first one, and I'm just picking one constraint per the categories that I've set out, which here you can see knowledge and skill development resources, social and cultural norms, economic environment, ecological dynamics, are sort of how I've organized my constraints at the moment, though acknowledging that there are a lot of overlaps between them. Some of the knowledge and skill development resources, talking extension services, knowledge transfers, also have a lot to do with social norms, social networks, and whatnot. So the economic constraint that I'm going to highlight is, in the context of agroecological transition, there are often upfront costs. So upfront costs, ongoing costs, or perceived costs. So upfront costs could be, to make a transition, you have to put in a riparian buffer to stop any, trying to promote the not letting chemicals get into waterways. Or ongoing costs if there's an increase in labor demands, which is fairly common, or perceived costs, if any of these costs are perceived to go up, whether or not they actually do, can be a barrier. So in this case, similar to the model of organic agriculture or payments for ecosystem services, where there's compensation for making this transition, in the case of agroecology and similar to organic, the access to a price differentiated market, or in this case, the lack of access or limited access to a price differentiated market could be a constraint. So there was one woman in the municipality that was completely conventional. In the past, she was talking about how she had adopted agroecology, but she quit because there wasn't anywhere to sell, there wasn't the PENAI, there wasn't the PAA, which is the other public procurement program. There was nowhere to sell. So specifically identifying a lack of market access where you can get this premium as a constraint. And other farmers, even the certified ones, talked about how they are able to sell their certified products at farmers markets. So they acknowledge, like, no, it's not just this the PENAI here that I can sell to. It's also farmers markets. But there was a lot of a lot of them expressed that they weren't necessarily getting higher prices there. So in that case, they have access to a market, but they're selling them at the same price as conventional products. So one farmer said, with a certified product, you can sell it at a higher price than conventional. However, we never do sell it at a higher price at the market. Someone always says, it's too expensive, it's too expensive. Someone else, similar thing, sort of talking about how the public there doesn't see the difference. The people here, you're going to sell, and they say that it's organic. They ask, what is this? And they don't know the difference between organic and conventional. So there's no market. So in this case, the PENAI is a guaranteed market that of the farmers who are certified, there are 14 certified farmers out of my sample. 9 of them reported that over half of their certified products go through the PENAI. So it's a significant portion of their market access. And of the 3, and 3 of those 14 who only reported that the PENAI was a small, just like under 10% or so of their sales of their certified goods, all of those had to find markets that were outside of their municipality, primarily on the coast, which is about 5 hours away. And these people, I'm not going to get too much into it because it does have to do with another section, but they were linked. They had a social network which allowed them to establish these markets elsewhere. All right. I'm only going to get through a couple of these, but that's okay. So here at the end, the Pei does have a guaranteed market that offers this price premium guaranteed for anyone who's participating, but the demand is limited. So for example, in one of the municipalities, I know I'm throwing names at you and you're probably not keeping up with which one's which, but Guerra Pinto has, it's the municipality that has a mix of conventional and certified farmers. And in that municipality, they have about 2,400 students. And currently, 80% of the school meals come through the farmers who participate in the Penai, which is one of the highest in at least the state, because the law only requires right now that 30% come directly from family farmers. But 80% are being provided through this program, and there are 34 farmers participating, and they're already splitting the quota. So they've already saturated that market. So the Penai can be beneficial, but especially with this one, with just having schools and daycares as the only population that you are supplying to, you're going to hit saturation fairly quickly. So an example of one farmer in Guerra Pinto, he mentioned that I was asking him about his participation in the Penai, and he said we needed to find a different market because the Penai and PAA aren't able to absorb all of our products. We had to find organic markets on the coast. So next one I'm going to, hopefully, I'll get through this one, we'll see. Knowledge and skill development. Agroecology is established as a more knowledge-intensive form of growing than, say, particularly compared to conventional, but even more so compared to your status quo. What knowledge and skills do you have at the beginning? So for them to invest into making this transition requires having access to information, knowledge, training, etc. So these can come in informal means through perhaps social networks or social movements, or formal extension services, which I'm going to just touch on now because I can't get through everything. But as a constraint, so some farmers expressed, even the conventional farmers expressed having a lack of access to formal extension services, whether that's government provided or the NGOs that provide services as well. 9 of the 16 farmers who have made the transition or are making the transition cited a lack of knowledge as a key difficulty, particularly in the beginning, and like learning to make that transition was tough. So there was a diversity of extension services, and just to be clear, extension services are like farmer training, farmer assistance on field, as well as courses that come in and teach people about different growing methods or products. So there is a diversity of offerings in these municipalities, but very few actually offer specific focus for agroecological production. So that was a constraint for all the farmers, but there were, no, I won't go there. So discussing how the Penai is linked to extension services varied based on the municipality. So in Lagis, for example, which is completely conventional, they had, it was run by the Secretary of Agriculture, which also supplied the extension agents. So they were integrated. The Penai was integrated with the people who ran the Penai also provided extension services. Whereas in the municipality that had mixed adoption, they had just links. So it was run by the Secretary of Education rather than of Agriculture. So they had some links to extension services, but it wasn't integrated explicitly, and there was no control over whether or not that was agroecological. And in Curitibanos, which is the fully agroecological group, the Penai operated completely distinct from extension services, so all the farmers had to go and find them themselves, which was interesting because they were the municipality that were all agroecological, and they got it primarily through informal means, whether through social networks, or there was one NGO that was specifically agroecological focused, and they all participated in it, which was interesting to me because that NGO, its headquarters is located in Lagis, but doesn't work with any farmers who are in Lagis. It actually is supporting these farmers who are, a couple hours away. So I think my time might be up, but I'll just briefly, I talked about social norms, social networks, and how the Penai does or does not have a role in facilitating farmer associations. So it's stipulated within the program that you have to be associated in order to participate, but depending on the ideology of that association, it may or may not incentivize any type of agroecological production. For example, in Lagis, the conventional group, they formed an association in order to participate. When I asked any of them about what that organization, what they get from it, what are the benefits, they only cited access to a tractor, access to tools, etc. The other groups, when I'd ask them what types of associations are you a part of, they would cite social movements, they would cite a small farmers group, a collective. One of them was an agroecological distribution cooperative where they would, one farmer started a cooperative that would take stuff to the coast for them. So that is one way that the Penai can incentivize the creation of these groups, but it doesn't really have any control over what the actual structure of those groups are and what the values are within them. So I think, I don't know if I need to go through all this, but these were my sort of thoughts of what the Penai could do. Am I way over? Okay, I'm done. I got to please finish, but you can look at those if you'd like.